and we'll just sit back and relax and let Dr. Raz take over for a few minutes at least. Go ahead, sir.
This is where I'm going to flex my honorary doctorate in pop culture. I've oddly dissected this film for pop culture class previously. This and They Live are the two films I've done this with. You've just watched 3 different films. Believe it or not, you've watched 3 separate films. And let me explain. One is also is my rebuttal to most of what you guys have said that are negative. Not that I'm saying that they're not negative things, but to explain. Film 1 was the film that the director set out to make, and the director that he believes, the film that him and many other people believe exists. An Italian scriptwriter and an Italian director, a couple, purchased the rights to make a Troll 2 movie because it was very popular at the time for foreign countries, especially Italy, to pay to get an IP, and create a movie. This happened frequently. Look it up. It's a lot more common than you think, especially in horror. So the concepts, there were 2 different concepts that they both had when coming out this movie. One, the writer, the vegetarian conversation we've already had, not going to rehash it. That's where she was coming from. Her entire point was about vegetarianism. His point, however, and the point that's actually more prominent than the vegetarianism, is how European people see American culture. The director intentionally set out to make this the most American movie that had ever been made. He based different characters on some of the most famous American comedies and American movies up to that point in his head. So also, a lot of European countries are known to be 30 years behind what America has in terms of like shows, music. It's not the case everywhere. Now that's a much shorter gap. But when he started making this film in the 80s and conceiving it with his wife, this was still the case in some countries. So his envisioning was, okay, this is a movie. It's going to be an 80s movie because it's in the 80s, but this is a small town. And from what I know of America, small towns like this are much like our towns where they're like way behind what's going on. So we also need to give a lot of these characters a 50s vibe. So that's the whole premise. That's literally everything. The Disney references, all that shit, were intentional by him because Disney was American and he didn't give a shit about being sued because he's Italian. I shit you not. He has gone on record and said that very thing. The trolls and really old folklore, especially European folklore, goblins, trolls are lumped into the same category, the same fucking category. They are an interchangeable word, actually. Look this up. It's actually true. So he did not make a movie that didn't have a troll in it because it was an interchangeable word. In fact, if you watch the documentary, you actually get to see the first moment ever that he realized his interpretation was different from everyone else's, because in the documentary, someone mentions, like Ron said, you used to be in a movie called Trolls 2 without trolls, and he's like, what do you mean there's no trolls? And he didn't understand. They had to translate that for him a couple times. He's like, and his wife looks up and goes, we called them goblins. And he's like, that's his whole reaction. And in an interview later that I saw in person, he discusses the interchangeability between the words, and he did not realize that Americans didn't know this and that it wasn't common. The mom's favorite song being Row, Row Your Boat. He saw her as an uneducated 50s or 50s stay-at-home mom, and his concept for American culture, the most important song to a mom would be a song that brought families together. And because Row, Row Your Boat is a car song and there's layers you have to sing, it promotes creativity versus, coming together and like building this thing, in stages or whatever. It's family working together. That's why that was her favorite song. Now, all these things and pretty much everything else that you guys mentioned that was wrong with it, if you look at it from the lens of the creator and what he thinks this movie is, that's a different movie than what you just watched, but it's still a movie that a lot of people watched. Second movie is the movie you actually watched, and it is the biggest clusterfuck of that era. Have there been way worse movies with way worse clusterfucks? Oh, yeah. Trust me, believe it or not, they're out there. But what this movie did was fail more spectacularly than any of them because, one, it had a way bigger budget than most of the movies that are worse, and many that are better than it. So it had all this money. It had an actually pretty decent behind-the-scenes crew, people that had a lot of experience, but they were all Italian. Even a lot of the backstage crew, so there was a lot of communication barriers with the cast. Pyle, why were they looking into the camera? They weren't. What happened was none of them knew when to cut. It was not clear. So they would do multiple takes, and then some takes he would just sit there. And so eventually they would just start to kind of look over the camera to kind of what's going on. And there were plenty of takes when none of them did look at the camera, but the director wanted to edit it that way because that was a very American thing to do in his mind. So like all these terrible things that happen on set, like the weird situations, the awkwardness, again, definitely, like everyone said, watch the documentary. It will explain some of what I'm saying right now. It was because it was a very weird situation that everyone that wasn't the Italian crew were in. They were called dogs. On set, they were often called American dogs, not just dogs. That should be pointed out that he, for the documentary, didn't say American dogs, but he often said American dogs because that's what this was to him. Again, so there were lots of problems, and it made a bad movie. It ruined some people. The mom, you see a lot of that in the documentary, but what a lot of it doesn't show is that was what she thought was going to be her big shot in acting and take off her whole career, and she had never really done anything at all before that. But like she'd had this dream since a child, and she comes from a very abusive family. She does this, and everyone literally laughs at her. And her mom weaponized it against her and used it against her and beat her down until until she pretty much just lost her damn mind. Kind of like Shelley Duvall, only sadder, actually, and not public at all. So the person she became was because of, her family, but this movie kind of propelled her into that. The rest of them, yeah. Two of them were actors and had been in commercials and like some bit parts. The sister, she was an actress before that. It almost ruined her career, and she's afraid to put it on her resume. That part she talks about in the interview. A lot of people just thought that their shit was going to take off, man. Right now, okay, back to the first movie. The first version of this movie I mentioned, you talk about him tackling the girl. That was very American for the guy that just go after the girl and do that and take charge like caveman style. That was, I forgot to cover that rebuttal in the first movie that you didn't see. Okay, so yeah, bad movie, terrible fucking movie. Will not disagree with you. I'd give it a solid 2 or 3 in normal conditions. But the third movie you watched, which is the movie a lot of us watched, it was our Killer Tomatoes. It was our Rocky. And you might scoff when I say Rocky or Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. But at the end of the day, did you know Attack of the Killer Tomatoes had the very first ever live screen acting before Rocky? Did you guys know that? Yeah. They did a live screen where actors would stand in front of the old screens in black and white back in the day and perform it in front of the screen, just like Rocky. So this was a thing before Rocky that people, seem to credit it to Rocky. Did you know Troll 2 does this as well? It's a thing. I've been to 2 of these where they screen the actual movie without the actors and they screen it with, and there's like a little mini con and a lot of the stars, show up to it sometimes in its community. This is that for so many people, a movie that made no goddamn sense that actually hurt a lot of people. You gotta tell me Rocky didn't hurt careers of a number of people? It did. They went through some crazy shit. Does that movie make a lot of sense? Fuck no, but it's brilliant. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, they're killing tomatoes. None of it makes fucking sense. But yet, these movies are the movies that brought so many fucking people together, like we talked about with Monster, Killer Sofa. These movies made people. They made relationships. They are the foundation of what, if Killer Tomatoes is the 70s representation of B, Rocky is the 80s interpretation of B in a lot of ways, the actual film version, not the play. And 90s is that for Troll 2. And there's movies that come out ever so often. Monster, I'll argue, is that for the 2000s. Like, there are movies in each decade that become way more important than the sum of its parts. And because of all these 3 movies that you saw in one, whether you realized you weren't watching them or not, it is so wildly interpretable. The Witch, she was the Green Witch. She could shapeshift. She wasn't actually the Queen of Trolls. She could shapeshift. That was actually shapeshift their culture. Why could they just suddenly be people and trolls? Because in folklore, trolls and goblins and things like that, fake creatures, could do that. So there's a lot of, logical things based on older folklore that people might not know, that those people that saw the third version of this movie when they watched it and kept watching it, they saw these things. They saw what Ron mentioned, the love and passion of the crew. They were half terrified out of their minds and confused most of the times. And that documentary, they talk about how that, like, all the American crew or cast members, they stuck together. They talked. They spent every day on the porch trying to make sense of what the fuck they were doing, because they had no idea if they did it anyway. 1, because they thought that this would make them. 2, because it was the most interesting that had ever happened to them, and they thought that what they were making, although they questioned it, they thought it was going to be the third movie the whole time. And when they all saw the community that built up around them, everybody's lives, except for, again, the actress who played the mom, all of their lives got better because of it. And it brought them together. It gave them a sense of being again, and it gave them a sense of accomplishment, regardless of having made the worst movie ever made. And again, I don't have a lot more to say than that, but those are all three movies in one that you just watched. And I hope that explains a little bit of, I don't know, anything.